Friends, I'm Subhash Gatade. I am part of New Socialist Initiative, a left ideological political platform, and we welcome you all for this special lecture on farm laws, farmers' movement, and agrarian crisis. Our guest today is Dr. Jaya Mehta. She's a interesting combination of a scholar, economist, activist, as well as a documentary maker. And she has always been there with us for us. I still, at a personal note, let me add that 2013 we had organized workshop of activists, and she had traveled all the way from Delhi to Bangalore to address the study circle. Uh, She is associated with Joshi Adhikari Institute of Social Studies. Uh, she is a founding member of Sandarbh, a group established in Indore, which carries out intellectual activities in the circle of politics and social movements. She wrote a report on the textile history of Indore town and also made a documentary film on the same theme in 2007. She has directed plays and made documentaries on various topics related to the working class and oppressed groups. She also edited a book titled The Russian Revolution and the Indian Freedom Struggle in 2018 on the 100 years of Russian Revolution. She wrote a booklet on the revolutionary potential of women workers in agriculture, which came out in 2019. And she coordinated a survey of primary survey of Kerala, studying the collective farming movement there, program there, Kutumbashri Mission, and which will soon come out in the form of a book. Uh, Friends, many interest voices in the academia and politics are today with us. We are also with us Dr. Dharamveer. He is a ex-MP, and so before Dr. Jaya Mehta starts, I want to tell you, inform you that Dr. Dharamveer will share his comments. He will be discussant for this talk. So, welcome, Dr. Jaya Mehta. Jaya ji.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my views on farmers' protest at the moment and agrarian crisis in the long-term perspective, because and giving me so much time to be able to explain my ideas. Thank you so much. I'll begin, of course, like anybody should begin, by offering my salute to our comrades on Sindhu border and Tikri border, and their long-standing struggle for now it's a month, exactly a month since they're sitting there and not being deflected from their demand with which they began, and the government has not been able to suppress them or to break them apart or to lure them. So it's something with which we all feel very hopeful, I'm sure. And also there has been enough description of what is going on there and about the farmers and their leaders, but I'll still give a brief sketch of what I think is very important. The fact that I think is very important in this movement is that it is very inclusive. Like just before we formally started this seminar, we had a discussion that the differentiation in farm community as such has been pushed into background, and not only Punjab and Haryana farmers and UP farmers, but farmers from Maharashtra, farmers from Madhya Pradesh, farmers from Karnataka, everybody has come to join this protest. And not just farmers, I'm told that agricultural laborers are into it, and hawkers are into it, mandis are into it. Uh, activists and artists extend their solidarity to the protest movement. But these people, the landless laborers and hawkers and mandi employees, have identified their own interest with the demand which is being put up by the farmers. See, farmers protest has this. Before this, we saw in 2018, a big march of farmers in Maharashtra from Nasik to Bombay. And then we saw farmers collecting again in November 2018 in Delhi. And I think since this demonetization move of Modi government, the farmers have really become restive, and they have been protesting and asserting their right again and again. And one thing which Sainath says is common from one end to other end of the country is that everybody has come to know about Swaminathan Commission report. And everybody knows, everybody is talking about implementation of that report. And particularly, the 2 points which were raised in the earlier protests were giving MSP as defined by the report, Swaminathan Commission report, and about the credit, waiving of loans and providing proper credit infrastructure. These two demands have been there for a long time among the farmers who have been protesting. Now, when earlier the farmers were talking about MSP, then many of us thought and raised this point that raising of MSP is it really advantageous to the farm community as a whole? Because if MSP is raised, then, and the government does not give equivalent subsidy, then what will happen to PDS? And if MSP is raised, what will happen to market prices? So, there was a sort of conflict, because I myself used to again and again, insist that 40% of the rural workforce in agriculture is landless labor, wage laborers. So they are buyers of food. And then amongst the cultivators also, more than 50% of cultivators are net buyers of food. So raising of MSP, if it results in rise in the market price or rise in PDS price, is going to harm majority of farm community. That is what I myself used to say. But now that the government has taken a stand to finish the entire system of FCI, food procurement and MSP, the interest of the buyers and sellers have merged. Because now if there is no food procurement, then there is no PDS. So quashing MSP altogether has resulted in uniting the interests of the landless laborers, small farmers and big farmers. They all are together in demanding that the existing system cannot be disturbed, because the matter of food procurement, FCI procurement of food grains and assurance of MSP ultimately translates into food security for the country as a whole, not just rural population, but also urban population. And it is a matter which is not just giving solidarity to some section on ideological grounds, but it is a matter of identifying your self-interest with the demand of the farmers. Similarly, the hawkers, the mandi employees, they all feel that if the system is under threat, then our employment is under threat. And the present procurement distribution of food grains relates to what the hawkers are selling, what the hawkers are producing. So it has really percolated to the entire majority of marginalized section of this society, and it has a very broad base. And I think that is a very positive aspect of this movement. Before anything else, I'd like to put that on record. Secondly, I don't want to talk about how they are doing a peaceful protest and how there has been no violence and how well equipped they are and their resilience and their preparedness to fight the government for as long as the government wants. All those points are have been elaborated in various media reports and social media, so I won't go into that. I'll briefly, I think this also, the three laws, agricultural laws, are also being talked about, but I'll briefly sketch them before I proceed further. The beginning of the reforms in agricultural market uh, ironically started with the relief package that our Prime Minister announced 1.5 months after the lockdown. Uh, after on 12th May, when he announced that big package to provide relief to people who were suffering because of lockdown and because of pandemic, and the finance minister elaborated in detail the various aspects of that package. The three farm bills as reforms in the agricultural markets were announced by our finance minister on 15th of May. The three bills were, I don't want to go into the formal names, but the bills were, one was Amendment in Essential Commodity Act, another was quashing the APMC Act, and third was institutionalizing the contract farming. Now, I think it is, I mean, I don't know how a government can think of removing food grains from Essential Commodity Act just at the time when migrant workers were walking hundreds of kilometers back home, when everybody had lost jobs, there were no livelihood possibilities available in rural and urban areas. And just precisely at that time, the government had the cheek to remove food grains from the essential commodities. The Amendment in Essential Commodity Act, and the government is talking about better market facilities by removing food items from the government control and farmers getting a higher price for their produce. Whereas the first necessity, it was a relief package for those who were affected by lockdown and by the pandemic, who had lost their livelihood, who had no food. So this was the time to give them food, and the government decided to deregulate and remove food items from the Essential Commodity Act. Then the second reform that Finance Minister announced was that APMC Act will be quashed. Now, I would like to note here that APMC Acts were enacted by the state governments in the decade of 1970s. And they were enacted by state governments to provide facilities for farmers to be able to get proper price for their produce and not get exploited by big farmers or big traders or corporates or whatever. So various state governments, the center gave the model act, and various state governments in their assemblies enacted Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee Act, according to which they made it mandatory that agricultural produce will be essentially sold in the market yards, in the premises of the market yard provided by the government, and with open auction. And government provided the infrastructure for weighing and pricing, grading of the produce which was brought. Government levied some charges for farmers who brought their produce to mandis to sell them. And the whole idea, I mean, the act was meant to give farmers protection against exploitation by big traders and corporates. Now, these acts, which were enacted by the state assemblies, how did the central government decide in one moment to quash them? That is not possible, because it is against the federal principles of the Constitution. And I don't know why various state governments have not come very vociferously against this move. I mean, I know that Punjab government assembly decided that they don't agree, and some other governments also have decided. But it is a big violation of the constitutional provision of federal structure, which the central government took the uh, lead to destroy. Then APMC market yards are the places where FCI procures the food grains from the farmers at MSP, minimum support price, as declared by the central government and then substantiated by state governments. So the government, the second reform was that APMC Act, that is the compulsion of selling your produce in the market yards of the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee, is no longer there, which does not mean that these mandis will be finished or these mandis will not act. They can continue to act, they can continue to levy their charges on the produce which is sold there. FCI will continue to buy produce from the markets in those mandis, but new trade areas were declared for the farmers at the farm gate, at the factory gate, at the whatever place they want. And in these new trade areas, people could buy and sell agricultural produce without the supervision of Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee and without paying any levies. So this was the second reform that was announced. Now, I also want to point out here that this is not the first time that the government, neoliberal government, has come up against APMC. In 2003, when we had an NDA government headed by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, that time also they decided that APMC Act should be revised, and companies, corporates should be allowed to buy produce outside the market yards. At that time, the central government made a model act and requested various state governments to modify their in their respective APMC acts in their assembly. It did not take the liberty of crashing it at the center. Madhya Pradesh government was one of the government which actually modified the APMC Act before the model act came from the center, and allowed corporates and companies to buy agricultural produce outside the mandis. And this is very interesting because that time ITC had taken the lead to, at least in Madhya Pradesh, had taken the lead to procure soybean and wheat from the farmers, and they had e-chopals and marketing hubs where they started buying soybean on a big scale from the big farmers. Uh, this was in 2002 and 3, and after in 10 years time, we find that ITC is no longer functioning in Madhya Pradesh soya trade. Why the company could not establish itself and what happened is a detail which I'll not get into, but the farmers reverted back to mandis and they started trading their produce on their own, but did not allow the corporate to intervene in their markets. So this has been going on for a long time, that if APMC Act is there, then there is a government monopoly. Not government is not the only buyer, but there is a restriction and free markets are not available. So we want to free the agricultural markets, and we want to remove this restriction that agricultural produce should be sold only in the market yards of the government and corporates. And then there was this question that the government is saying now also, that there are lots of middlemen in mandis, the government mandis, APMC market yards, who facilitate the buying and selling in those yards. So these middlemen get their commission, which unnecessarily is harmful for the producer as well as the consumer. So if companies buy directly from the producers, these middlemen's commission will be lost, and the producers will also gain and consumers will also gain. But actually, the point is that those small artiyas, middlemen in mandis, will be replaced by the company, because company is also a link between the final consumer and the producer. And all the commission which was going to those small artiyas, there has been a structure in which these middlemen are there. They provide loans, they exploit the farmers, but these structures are important. And these artiyas are not very rich people who are exploiting small farmers. Many of them, majority of them are small traders themselves. So these middlemen will be removed, and directly corporate can buy the produce from the producer and give it to the consumer, in which nobody pointed out that corporate itself is a very powerful middleman, which will take all sorts of advantages and make profit for itself. So this was the second reform that was announced. And the third reform was institutionalizing the contract farming. Because if APMC Act stands, then the corporates having a contract with the farmer and deciding the price of the produce outside the market yard beforehand, and then dealing with the farmer, is something which conflicts with the APMC Act. But contract farming has been going on, and it has been going on much in advance in Punjab, for example. And the third marketing reform was to institutionalize, to make it legal, and to encourage it. So these marketing reforms were announced in May by the finance minister. Then ordinances to legitimize these reforms were passed in June, sometime 5th of June or something. And then in the September session of Parliament, the ordinances were placed and they became laws. And all that mayhem that happened in Rajya Sabha need not be described over here. So the three laws which relate to modifying Essential Commodity Act, crashing APMC Act, and institutionalizing contract farming. The three farm laws actually provide opportunity for the corporate to make greater entrenchment in agricultural markets, because it is wrong to say that corporates haven't got entry in agricultural markets. They already have got entry in agricultural markets. Both the inputs and agro-processing is completely captured by corporates since the neoliberal era, or since the 80s. They already have. But still, the state control existed. And the state control should have been improved. The state control should have been extended. The state control should have reached the small farmers, and the distribution system should have been improved. Instead of that, the government decided to say that the state control is an obstruction in the competitive market, free market action, and therefore we want to remove it and give farmers the chance to exploit the market to the best of their ability and get as much for their produce as they can. The farmers in Punjab saw immediately that handing over completely the control of agricultural produce market to corporate is going to play havoc in the long run. Because I have seen lots of interviews and everybody is saying, but government is saying that APMC will continue. I mean, the mandis will continue. The government is saying FCI will continue. Then why are the farmers so agitated? And the farmers are very clearly saying that if the government has this provision that the new trade areas will not charge any levy for market transactions, whereas the government market yards will be charging levy. So that makes a difference in the prices. And if corporate enters the markets and gives us better prices, then farmers slowly will stop going to government market yards and will switch over to corporate new trade areas. And once they switch over to new trade areas, then we have the example of agribusiness, not just in own African countries, Africa itself, and we stop going to government market yards, then government market yards will become redundant after some time. And when they become redundant, FCI procurement will become redundant and MSP will have no meaning. And once the monopoly is completely in corporate hands, then they can exploit us any way they like. This is the future scenario, and we must congratulate the Punjab farmers that they saw this future scenario and refused the better opportunities given by the government to have higher prices for their produce, and insisted that we want the existing structure. And I've already said that this existing structure has the interest of whole lot of majority of the marginalized sections in urban and rural poor farm community, and they all have identified their interest with the farmers, and they all want that the existing system should not be disturbed. So this is the situation today, and we do not know. The farmers have again given a call that they're ready to have another talk with the government on condition that the 3 laws are repealed. And we, at least I personally, do not think that the government will agree for it. But whether this particular protest movement succeeds or it does not succeed, that, according to me, is not so important as the fact that the movement has taken place. Because when you have a protest movement and you are sitting together with with such broad-based community for a month, then after the protest is over, even if you have lost out, you are not the same as you were before the movement. I would say the same about the Muslim community coming against CAA. When they have been out protesting for their rights, then they are, after, even if the movement has been quashed, they are not the same as they were before the protest started. So the fact, the process of struggle itself changes the worldview, and if it changes the worldview of such broad-based community of marginalized and a little better off farmers, then it has great potential for future. This I'd like to again put down that, the victory or defeat in this particular struggle is not so important as the struggle itself. Because again and again the farmers are coming on streets, again and again they are getting together, again and again they're asserting their right. It gives them a confidence. And I was reading Prabhat Patnaik, and I liked his point that he talked about the concept of into different related to wealth of nation. It related to a particular majority community. It oppressed the minority communities. It believed in imperialist oppression. It attacked. It agreed with other nation for your own at the time of freedom struggle amongst the third world country was a different concept, because it talked of people. It did not talk of wealth of nation. It talked of people. It talked of giving better lives to the people. gave the identity of people in the nation. And slowly, with 70 years of post-independence period, the way the development trajectory has taken place, the kind of nationalism that Modi government has been talking is the kind of nationalism that the Europe of 17th century was talking, which is a nationalism which is not inclusive. India becoming the 5th biggest economy or 3rd biggest economy, or which talks of GDP as projecting the power of India, and it also talks of a particular majority community hijacking the entire identity of the nation. So the CAA protests and the farmers' protest with such broad base is sort of bringing back that where people are saying we are the nation. We are the taking back nationalism that. Why? Is my voice not okay? My voice is giving problem? You're all muted, so I can't hear. It's okay.
We are not able to hear you. There's some network problem, madam. Some network problem.
That is what my son is saying.
Please. You can speak loudly rather.
Loudly?
Or also speak close.
Should I take my computer to the other room?
Or you can.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I was saying that, these people who have come together to protest for such a long time are redefining the concept of nationalism. And if they are redefining the concept of nationalism, which is an inclusive concept, which does not differentiate between people according to caste or community, and which is a concept which talks about well-being of people, not about the wealth that the nation has acquired, then it is a very, very positive change, which the ordinary men and women, not the intellectuals, not the big elite of the economy, but the ordinary men and women have brought back on agenda. And I think if they have brought back an agenda, the concept of nation as well-being of people, as an inclusive concept, and they have realized that India is not the 5th biggest economy or the 3rd biggest economy, but India consists of so many people who do not have enough food, who do not have proper employment, who do not have right to health, who do not have to education, then we think of India's development in future in a different way. And I think that these movements, the CAA movement or the farmers movement or the workers movement, have the potential to redefine our development trajectory. And if they have the potential to redefine our development trajectory, then I want to talk a little bit about, restructuring the very lopsided employment pattern that this development of 70 years has produced. And I'll begin with agriculture. Although I said that we should not talk of differentiation in peasantry, but we must realize that when 50% of workforce is in agriculture, 245 million men and women have their livelihoods dependent on agriculture, then what is the production structure in agriculture? And you cannot resolve agrarian crisis unless you talk of the production structure in agriculture. According to the NSSO data, which is the latest data for 2012 and 13 is available. There are 2 points that I want to, 2 statistics that I want to give. NSSO collects data on operational holdings and ownership holdings of rural households every 10 years. And the total land available for operational holdings in 90 to 93 was 125 million hectares. That land in 2013, that is in 30 years time, has got instead land available for operational holdings. Can you hear? Is there a problem with my voice still? Yes? Wait, I'll take it to the other room where network is better. Is it better now?
Yeah.
1 minute. Let me have a something to put on this. So the total land available for the people to do farming has got reduced by 30 million hectares in 20 years time, which means agricultural land is fast getting out of agriculture for non-agricultural uses. Whereas people, the workforce in agriculture, still, because there is no employment opportunity available outside of agriculture. Now, there are about 1 million, 101 million, and only 94 million hectares of land. So average holding size is less than 1 hectare, which is the marginal farm specification given by the government, which does not give you enough land to be able to produce dignified livelihood. So first of all, the number of people who are in agricultural sector and the amount of land which is available for them for direct farm activities does not match, meaning the land available is not sufficient to provide dignified livelihood to so many people who are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. Secondly, the distribution of land is such that 40% of rural households have no farmland at all. Next 30% of rural households have farmland. The average size of that farmland is 0.2 hectare. 0.2 hectare. 1 hectare is the size for marginal farmer. 0.2 hectare is half an acre. So with so many 30% of farm holdings, average holding size is 0.2 hectares. So many small holdings are there with which people can do nothing. There is no land, there is no water accompanying the land, and there are no other resources. So we're talking about MSP, we're talking about price, but what about the production? We're talking about credit, but there is no land. 30% has got 0.2 as average land. After that, about 13% holdings have an average land size of 0.7 hectares, and 10% holdings have an average size of 1.3 hectares. So 93% of rural households are either landless or belong to marginal and small farm categories. Only 7% of rural households have sufficient land to be able to produce, to have some kind of, marketable surplus, and to talk about MSP and market, agricultural markets. This production structure cannot provide a dignified livelihood to so many men and women, and something needs to be done very very necessarily something needs to be done. Otherwise, agricultural crisis cannot be resolved unless land-labor relations are solved. And I think that if corporate encroachment of agriculture has to be has to be opposed, if it has to be stopped, then the only way is to have collective economic base of those who are into agriculture. And collective economic base means collective farms, collective production farms. We have cooperatives, service cooperatives in marketing and dairy and other things, but collective production farms, farm cooperatives, production cooperatives of farms are necessary. Otherwise, 0.2 hectare of land, you can neither do any mechanical mechanization over there, neither you have water, optimal water possibilities there, neither you have optimal crop choice over there. So these small size farms cannot be made viable, whatever you do. And these farms have to be necessarily pooled. And if government does not take the lead to do such a drastic change, then the movement, the people, the protagonists who are there on streets have to take the lead to make collective economic base to be able to make their farms viable. It is necessary for the agricultural farmland going away from agriculture to non-agricultural uses also. Because once a cooperative is made, the individual farmers will not be forced by the markets to sell their small size farm to be able to meet their daily needs or to meet some contingencies. So these cooperatives will also save agricultural land on a macro basis and will provide viable farming. But still, the agricultural cooperatives do not take care of so much of labor which is still in agriculture. And therefore, it is necessary to form collective economic base, not just of land, but also of labor. Unless we have labor collectives who insist on reclaiming the economic space and production space which has been appropriated by the corporates. I mean the input and output linkages of direct farm activities have to be reserved for the labor cooperatives, which constitute just now the surplus labor or the migrant labor or informal labor in urban areas. So unless the entire production structure is changed in rural areas and flowing from there to urban areas, and labor collectives demand their employment space and production space and change the production relations on a macro level, we cannot realize the concept of nationalism and the concept of nation building as people imagined during their freedom struggle. So I've spoken for 45 minutes and I want to end that I have very big hopes and very big dreams that this broad-based agitation and protest by the ordinary men and women will lead to a major change in our thinking, in our actual production process, in our distribution, in our value system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for a brilliant presentation, Jayaji. And
just a minute. Let me finish one more thing. Since this is part of a lecture in your series of democracy dialogue, I heard the earlier talk by Dipankar in which democracy was being taught. I want to say that the dictatorship of market is the most cruel and most ruthless dictatorship that one can think of. And people do not realize that this is dictatorship. To get freedom from the dictatorship of market is necessary for progress of civilization. Actually, this point was made by Paul Sweezy when he was talking about post-revolutionary societies in Soviet bloc. And he said, whatever wrong went, But one very big achievement that the post-revolutionary societies made was that they politicized the use of surplus in the system. When a surplus is produced, the market does not give you the freedom to use it according to people's needs. It does not give you the freedom to politically decide how to use this surplus. And those economies, by taking complete control, politicized, maybe they took wrong political decisions, but they got the freedom from the dictatorship of market and provided an opportunity for people to decide how to use the surplus, how to use technical progress, how to use environment, how to use whatever resources the nature gives us. So I think the kind of society that I'm talking about, the kind of collective economic base that I'm talking about, the kind of political strength of people that I'm talking about a system where politics reigns supreme, not economics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The concept of dictatorship market is very interesting. We can take it forward in the discussion also. Uh, I would invite Dr. Dharamveer Gandhi to share his views. But before I invite him, let me tell you that he has been with us for the last 3 decades. We have worked together as a part of People's Movement, and he's well known in Punjab as a People's Doctor. And he was MP of he's ex-MP. Last time he was MP, and is still engaged in struggle of the people. And the present farmers movement also is very much involved. So we have requested him to be here and share his views on the theme.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Dharamveer.
Thank you, Swaji, for giving me an opportunity to talk today. Really a very wonderful presentation by Madam Jaya Mehta, and on the present bills on agriculture and the struggle of Punjab and northern India farmers, and more and more states joining the struggle, and giving a full perspective of these farm laws and the agrarian crisis in the country, and the way forward also. Not only talking on this present agitation, but the possible way forward in keeping in mind the interest of all sections of society, and not only the farmers, but the consumers and the working people, landless laborers, and the marginalized farmers also. But the only thing I would like to add is that the significance of the struggle is to be seen beyond just the farmer laws. It has challenged the forward march. For the first time, the forward march of Hindutva forces, the deadly combination of corporate capital, nationalism, and religion, which is a very, very ominous sign for the Indian Union, or for our country and people. It has stalled that march in a way that never seen before. Of course, this agitation against CAA, NPR, and NRC was a great struggle, but and unfortunately, because of COVID crisis, the government crushed it. But this farmers' uprising, and involving various sections of society with the interest, vested interest in opposing these laws. Both the consumers, the small farmers, the big farmers, and the agglomerate of all these people, is a great thing to occur in the history of India in the last 7-8 years. And I think it will pave the way for future movements against the dictatorial, this Hindutva agenda, and this corporate religion, and this nationalism nexus. And I see a great future in the present movement. And really, I will salute Punjab farmers and Haryana farmers and farmers all over the country who have come forward, challenge the existing dictatorial setup. The marching forward, unhindered march of this triad has been challenged for the first time during last 7-8 years with so much of resolve and conviction and clarity, and the way the farmers leaders and the farmer organization are negotiating with the are having very hard negotiation with the government, it gives us the hope that the struggle might win also, it may not win also, but at least it has shown the way that the rulers, however powerful they may be, however strong they may look like, can be challenged and on the soil, on the ground. And I believe we should look at this moment just beyond the farmer laws, just beyond this agitation, but it's of great significance for the future struggles, for future of this country and future of the working people and working class in the country. Thank you very much.
You would like to say something about this, Jayaji? Anything specific to add to what Ranveer
I thought
said?
he said what I said. It wasn't.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
was...
please. Kumar Ketkarji also is also with us. He's MP and he has been regular presence in these NSI meetings, lectures. So some few words, Kumarji. You're inaudible. You're not audible, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No, I have a simple question actually. A few moments I may have missed, so if that is answered. We have two reference points. One is Stalin's collectivization and collective farming. Another is Mao's communes and Mao's collective farming. Of course, in India, in Maharashtra particularly, there is cooperative farming reference also. When she was suggesting collective farming is the answer to this crisis, I do not know how can we relate it to the political establishment concerning collective farming. And if there is no political dimension to the agitation, would it not weaken the resolve of the farmers?
Please.
Collectivization in socialist economies, both Russia and China have not given us a blueprint, which can be followed. And you have to get into the period of 1920s in Russia and then have an assessment of Stalin's collectivization process and the problems therein. And you also have to see what went wrong with Mao's communes. And obviously something went wrong with Mao's communes also. But something, there was once an interview taken by Saeed Naqvi of Fidel Castro, when he said when it was in 91, when socialism was going away from everywhere, and Saeed Naqvi asked Fidel that everybody is giving up the socialist path, do you still want to continue? He said, what is correct is not decided by what is successful. So if something has not been successful, I do not decide that this is incorrect. And I mean, sorry to take such a big name as Fidel, but I think that if collectivization process in China and Russia had problems, and they do not give us a blueprint, does not mean that collective economic base is a proposition which should be discarded. How to bring about a collective economic base, and in our particular circumstances, how to bring it about, is a very big question on which I alone cannot give answer. I feel convinced that there is no other answer to agrarian crisis except collective economic base. But how to bring it about in the given circumstances requires lots of heads together, and correctly, as Kumar Ketkar said, that a political direction is necessary. A political direction is very necessary. An ideological struggle is very necessary. A change in value system is necessary. That's why I gave such an elaborate this thing on nationalism and people being important. And people actually are able to see what is advantageous to them. That is what we are seeing when they come on the street again and again. Then they see what their interests are, and I'm sure that people have this attraction uh, for community, for a collective, uh, as against isolation, which capitalism leads you to. I analyze farmer suicide in the neoliberal era, not just as an economic crisis, but also the capitalist culture which has infiltrated the rural areas and completely isolated the farmer. That they do not even share with their wives what debts they have taken. The farm widows do say, we don't know what our husbands have done. So the community living in rural areas have got disrupted by capitalist forces, and I think community living is a very civilized way of progress of civilization. Community, I mean, it can have different forms, but you have to be collective, you have to be together. And in that context, I also want to talk about the latest study that I did about Kudumbashree women in Kerala. Kerala has this big Kudumbashree mission in which women's self-help groups are are introduced into productive activities. They are introduced into political activities, and thrift and saving one part of it. So I made a primary survey of small women's groups, collectives who got into collective farming. They collectively leased land, or their small land pieces they pulled together and they did farming. They had problems, and I am not saying that economically it was a big success. But what I realized during my study there was that working collectively completely changed the mindset of these women. Their worldview really expanded much beyond their family, much beyond their group, much beyond their village, and it made them very political. So I think that collective base is not it has not succeeded. Does not mean that the idea has to be given up. Like the mandis, market yard, APMC and FCI has also not succeeded in giving food to everybody, but it cannot be discarded. One has to find ways to make it efficient.
We have with us Comrade Congo also, leader of Communist Party of India, and it would be great if he makes some comments or raise question. Comrade Congo.
Good evening, everybody. I was after trying to analyze the important question raised by Mr. Kumar Ketkar. See, the cooperation itself means there should not be any coercion. The example of Stalinist cooperative movement and Maoist cooperative movement was state-sponsored and state compulsion cooperative movement. Role of state would be very important. I won't say that without the help of the state or active support from the state, the cooperative movement will succeed. So cooperative movement needs state help and state intervention. But help and intervention does not mean coercion or suppression or compulsions. This will be contradicting the very idea of cooperation. Therefore, I feel that experimentation. See, I was studying the Norwegian example, the Finland, Norway, and other states, where still farmers are in quite a good number are still in agriculture. There, more than 49 to 55% farmers are engaged in cooperative movement, and therefore they are able to compete with multinational cooperatives, multinational companies and corporations who are now trying to take over the agriculture industry as such. In India today, the conflict is between the cooperative big corporations and the farmers. The existence of the farmers, existence of public distribution system, existence of the Food Security Act itself is in danger, and therefore multiple interests are involved in this agitation. But real agitation is between the farmers and the corporations. And unfortunately, the Indian state, which is democratically elected state, is playing a role of dalal of the big corporations. And that is the grouse. And that is the fight which we must try to understand. And therefore, this has a very great significance as far as the political struggle is concerned. The Indian state power as such, I'm not talking of the state government, but Indian state power has for a long time enjoyed the support of the farm lobby. And now that farm lobby is under danger because of the internal struggle of this of the power. And multinational cooperatives and Indian corporations are trying to win over the state vis-a-vis the farmers. And therefore, this struggle has that political dimension, which we must try to understand. What Jayaji was saying, that how do we help about 80% of our farmers who are small farmers to survive? And cooperation and cooperative movement, yes,
I think
is the only answer.
We have.
Can I make one point?
We have lost contact with him. I think we can move to the next.
No, I wanted to make one point about the cooperatives that Comrade Kango was talking about. See, when I'm saying that you make collective base and have convert the land labor relations from individual ownership of land to collective ownership of land, I am not having in mind that these various cooperatives will compete with each other as in a market system. I have in mind what Lenin had in mind, that cooperatives, of course, when state has taken control of the, when proletariat has taken control of the state, cooperatives are harbinger to a future socialist society. And when I'm talking about Kudumbashree also, the Kudumbashree collectives do not compete with each other. They have this whole exercise of federation of these collectives and networking of these collectives in the macro level. So when I'm talking of cooperatives, I'm not talking of cooperatives in a capitalist system. I'm talking of cooperatives as harbinger of a different worldview altogether.
There is a question from Shashi Shekhar Singh, that why the whole farmers movement is not is limited to Punjab only. Mainly Punjab farmers are only participant. That is his perception. So why it is that the predominance of Punjab farmers is there in this whole farmers movement?
No, this I said in the beginning, actually, because the FCI system is most efficient and the Punjab farmers get the advantage of MSP. So they began the agitation. But now it has become so broad-based that it is not just Punjab and Haryana, that people who are in the agitation will tell you that people are coming from Maharashtra, people are coming from Karnataka, farmers are coming from Odisha. It is not possible for them to come to Delhi borders so easily as Punjab and Haryana farmers and UP farmers can come. But it is all over the country. And I said that even the landless have identified their interests with the demand of repeal of these three laws, because a threat to FCI system and MSP is a threat to food security. So it is not just Punjab farmers who are, they've taken the lead, but everybody is with them.
Unfortunately, the chat box, the questions in the chat box just disappeared. So I request Comrade Bhargav that he raised this question. He had raised some questions, so I could not see it. Comrade Bhargav. Bhargav is a part of NSI, New Socialist Initiative, and is active in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana.
Thank you very much, Jaya Mehta ji, for this very timely and very perspective presentation. I have a small question. In Andhra, we see a very peculiar phenomena, unlike Punjab and Haryana. You know very well that the coastal Andhra, especially Godavari and Krishna Delta region, is also one of the important regions where Green Revolution was introduced. Green Revolution technology was introduced and prospered greatly, and in fact, great agricultural wealth is created, and even a regional ruling class, a provincial bourgeoisie has emerged from that kind of a wealth and all that. But what has happened in Andhra is a very peculiar development that most of these, those who benefited from the Green Revolution, those large landowners or the rich farmers, or the provincial agrarian bourgeoisie that emerged in those regions, they are more or less absent landowners now, even though they never left the control over their land, their ownership, their title is still intact with them, but they are no more doing it. And even in the most developed agriculture parts of coastal Andhra, whether two Godavari districts and Krishna and Guntur, these delta areas, more than 85 to 90% of the land is leased out to the marginal farmers. And in fact, many Dalit agricultural laborers, they take the land for the lease and they do it. So how do we understand? It is one important thing that these large farmers are no more they are no more into the farming. They left, they became absentee, and most of their land is given leased out to the small marginal farmers and landless laborers. So one important reason why they are not ready to mobilize uh, different sections of the peasantry against these formulas, as we witness in other parts of the north and western India. What is your take? You must have observed this phenomena. People, these absentee, large number of rich farmers being absentees in this coastal Andhra Pradesh. And how do you understand this?
The coastal Andhra, I don't know very well, but other regions also, this, especially we see it in Kerala, that the new generation is no longer interested in farming. So the young generation of people who have land have moved out of farming, and the land is being leased out to those who have no employment outside of agriculture. So if the well-off farmers, large farmers had enough resources and were able to move out of farm occupation to more attractive urban occupations, then it is quite likely that they are not interested in farming it themselves, but they don't give up their land because land has real estate value. So they keep their land, they lease it, and they may make use of it as and when the opportunity arises. And that is a problem, that the young generation is not into farming, and one will have to change this whole production pattern in agriculture, to be able to have macro level food security, as well as to have dignified employment possibilities for those who remain in farming. And just now, the small and marginal farmers are into farming. They are tenant farmers. They are landless agricultural laborers, not because because they have no option anywhere outside. And those options have to be created also. So resolution of agrarian crisis means restructuring the entire economy, not just agriculture.
Ashok Chaudhary had also raised some question. I am not able to read it because they disappeared. If he can unmute himself and say what he wants to say, he wanted to say. Ashok Chaudhary is involved in people's movement in
Yeah, I
parts
know.
of Uttar Pradesh. So, Ashok, Ashok, are you able to hear me? No, he's not able to. And Vineet Tiwari,
Hello.
Vineet Tiwari is also here. Yeah, Ashok, please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't
Ashok.
have any question actually. It's been very inspiring and encouraging speech. Only thing that the discussion going on, what I understand, that cooperative has to be in the spirit of collective. I mean, what she is talking about a socialist towards moving towards social, and there has been a tradition of collective in our country, in our Adivasi people, but they were under oppression of colonial power. They've lost track. I think that can be revived. But I wanted to say that Jayaji, the land, about 30% land is controlled by Indian state, and forest department alone 24%. There are railway, defense, irrigation, and they call so-called land bank. And I don't know how this question has to be how government can have land bank. Indian constitution doesn't allow to the Indian government to be the owner of resources. they're supposed to manage or supposed to function as a manager. They have become owners. I mean, when you say that land, there is no enough land, I cannot fully agree with you. There are land, but one have to trace and find it out, and it is before us. And there are people, landowners who are not, as you said, they are not doing agriculture and lending out, and there are all big landowners are also in the services, in the job, in business. So that kind of approach has to be that land should be redistributed in the pattern of land to the tillers, and we have betrayed in the 50s. After JD Act, we didn't go for the land for the tillers. Only Kashmir did it. Now Kashmir has lost it. So I think the people's movement has to be oriented, and in Forest Right Act ensures collective production. It is the only act which gives collective ownership, but Indian revenue law doesn't give collective ownership. That's a contradiction. I don't know how the government will resolve it, because they need a political willpower to resolve this kind of contradictions between cooperative and collective, between competition within cooperatives. But that political willpower is not absent, and we need a new generation of political leadership which only can change this order. That's about what I want to say. Thanks. It's very encouraging to listen to you.
By the way, I think in the present farmers' protest also, that Kisan Ekta Ugrahan section, they have this Jameen Prapti Sangharsh Committee, where the Dalits, landless Dalits, are asking panchayats to give them land on which they want to do collective farming. So they're also part of this agitation that I read.
Samlat land is there, and then in Tamil Nadu, Panchama land is for the Dalits, and they have been deprived.
Now I invite Comrade Vineet Tiwari. He wanted to also ask some question. Vineet.
थैंक यू सुभाष। नहीं, मैं केवल जया से नहीं बल्कि सभी के सामने एक सवाल रखना चाहता हूं, और वो सवाल ये है कि जब कोई भी मूवमेंट होता है, चाहे वो आज़ादी का आंदोलन रहा हो, तो उसमें दलितों के या महिलाओं के सवालों को थोड़ा हाशिए पर रखा गया, ये कह करके कि अभी जो है वो मुल्क को आज़ाद कराना जरूरी है। तो जब आज़ादी आ जाएगी तो उसके बाद दलितों के और महिलाओं के बराबरी के सवाल को हम आगे उठा सकेंगे। लेकिन वो बाद में वो सवाल जो है अभी 72 साल बाद भी रिजॉल्व नहीं हुए। जो लैंड टू द टिलर का एश्योरेंस था, जो वादा था, वो पूरा नहीं हुआ। जमीन के वितरण में अभी उतनी ही गैर बराबरी बनी हुई है जितनी कि लगभग पहले थी, और बल्कि बढ़ाने के लिए नए किस्म के जो उपक्रम इन 3 कानूनों के जरिए लाए जा रहे हैं वो भी सामने। तो अब आज सुबह मैं था एक वेबिनार में जिसमें प्रोफेसर अरुण कुमार और उनका प्रेजेंटेशन मैंने सुना, और मैंने ये बात रखी कि भाई इन 3 कानूनों के खिलाफ जो आंदोलन उठा है उसके साथ ही एग्रेरियन क्राइसिस की मूल वजहों को भी हम उठाएं। तो उसमें उनका मत ये था कि अभी वो बात को अगर हम उठाएंगे तो ये जो आंदोलन एक स्वरूप लेकर के बना है, ये इसमें डेविएशन आ जाएगा, बिखराव हो जाएगा अगर हमने इसके भीतर डिफरेंशिएशन ऑफ पेजेंट्री के सवाल को एड्रेस करना शुरू कर दिया या रेज करना शुरू कर दिया। तो मेरा इस वजह से सवाल ये कि ये कब एड्रेस होंगे, मतलब अगर ये 3 कानून मान लीजिए रिपील भी हो जाते हैं और ये आंदोलन की जीत हो जाती है, तो क्या उसके बाद में एग्रेरियन क्राइसिस को वाकई रिजॉल्व करने के लिए यही हमारे सारे जो आंदोलन में आज शामिल साथी हैं, क्या ये उन सवालों की तरफ भी तवज्जो देंगे कि खेत मजदूरों के साथ में जो हाल है उनको सुधारा जाना चाहिए, उन्हें सुधारा जाना चाहिए, या कोऑपरेटिव्स की जो बात जया ने कही या कलेक्टिव फार्मिंग की जो बात कही। और फिर सबसे बड़ी बात ये कि मतलब जो अशोक ने भी बात उठाई और बाकी साथियों ने कहा कि जिसके पास में 200 एकड़ 500 एकड़ की जमीन है वो अपना खेत क्यों 2 एकड़ वाले के साथ में साझा करना चाहेगा और उसके किस तरीके। तो इसलिए ये क्लास का जो एंगल है जो कलेक्टिवाइजेशन के भीतर भी उठेगा और जो इस मूवमेंट के भीतर भी कहीं कुछ नजर आ रहा है। तो ये मैं किसी एक से सवाल नहीं पूछ रहा हूँ, लेकिन अगर कोई इस पर अगर टिप्पणी करेगा तो मेरे लिए आसानी होगी। शुक्रिया।
मेरे ख्याल से जया जी का एक बोलना इसमें ज्यादा ठीक रहेगा, वो आज हमारी मुख्य वक्ता हैं। I think she should make some comment, please, because we cannot open it for discussion.
I said it that it is not these three demands. It's not the demands against these three laws which are important. It is not the defeat or victory which is important. What is important is that such a broad base has collected together and has asserted their right. And as Lenin said, you have to have broad base to be able to identify your dominant contradiction. And once that is resolved, then you have other contradictions, and it is a process which has to continue. And political parties, left political parties, have big responsibility to continue this process and not just end it with the repeal of these three laws. Because people are ready. I do feel very strongly that people are ready for a change, for a big change. They are ready to assert their identity. What is required is a program. What is required is a direction.
I think I would request Ravi to raise some question about the ongoing discussion, and then let's
give answers.
No, please, yeah, some comment, and yeah, so that
I wanted to listen to Jayaji and learn from her. I am no expert of this sector or economics, but yeah, now that Subhash asked me, I can make just a brief comment about the political significance of what is going on. And that is, I mean, I do not want to go into, and I don't have the capability to go into the economics of agrarian sector and so on, and how the present movement somehow has arisen from the material conditions or crisis in the material conditions that Jayaji would know much better, and she has already shed very insightful, she has given light on that. The political dimension which appears important to me is that even though it is it looks as farmers movement, or it has started out as farmers movement, it has become a very broad-based movement. It has become a movement against the unholy nexus between the fascistic government and the Hindutva RSS ideology with the naked corporate power that one sees now in the names of few corporate houses and a few corporate houses. When we discuss these things, the political significance for me, it appears to be, is that the fight has to be focused against this nexus. The fight has to be focused against the government, the Hindutva hegemony that has been going on, I mean, even though unsuccessfully, and they have, unfortunately, they have gained ascendance. Their hegemony is quite well established for them. But now their real agenda is coming out, that while they have the responsibility of managing the democratic polity, the real agenda is to privatize, India, they give wealth to those few selected houses. So what is known as crony capitalism, the naked crony capitalism, they are able to deliver that, manage democratic politics. And how can they manage the democratic politics? Manage the democratic politics because of what kind of society that we have in India, the kind of traction that Hindutva ideology the Mandir movement, starting with that, and all the communal ideology that has seeped into the society. So when we say that people are ready for big change, I believe in that. I mean, people like us have been not very successfully, but still active in the movement for decades. But we should not forget that the Hindutva fascists also have a very large traction in the society. It is not some kind of deception only through which they have attraction, they have acceptability. They have real acceptability in the society. There is something in the makeup of the society which, without blaming the people and without blaming the society, still we have to recognize this reality. And if there is a movement that starts with something as tangible as MSP or farm laws or agrarian crisis, but it presents a challenge to such hegemony, it presents a challenge to this to shut up, during the national movement, because Azadi was the central slogan. So always there will be some other central slogan, and these real life issues will not come to center stage. I understand that question, but unfortunately, when you are faced with the kind of forces that we are faced with, even raising the very much needed, very important question requires a strategy, requires some thoughtfulness, that raising which questions at what time will do what to this movement. That is why I feel, and before the meeting started, I was sharing it with Jayaji, that the question of differentiation among the peasantry, that is one example, but there could be other questions too. Questions of Dalit rights, questions of women's rights, questions of lot of social transformation that our society and our social mind has to go through. At such moment, at such focused moment, when there are thousands and thousands of people encircling Delhi, at least on these 2 or 3 or 4 borders, may not be very opportune moment to raise those questions. Now, I could be blamed for again playing the same broken record, that the agenda is something else, so let us all unite on the central agenda and ignore the Dalit question and ignore the landless question. I'm not saying that, and Jayaji has brought it very, very very well, that this is a very broad-based movement, and 93% of people, if they own less than 1.3 hectares of land, I mean, if by farmer you mean some kind of rich or bourgeois capitalist kind of farmer, 93% of people who are somehow or the other, they don't have land, more than 1.3%. So what farmers movement only? This is workers movement too. This is a movement of various sections of people who make a living by calling themselves trader or whatever, but that in essence they are workers. So at the economic base, at the foundation, this is a very large, broad-based movement, and I hope that internal discussion among the farmers organizations, or internal discussions, debates, controversies, difference of opinion that exist in the left biradari, among the left organizations, that does not come to fore at this moment. No matter, I mean, I'm saying a very troubling thing. We are always told, and we were taught in our political childhood, that principles you should never give up, and ideology you should never give up, and the key questions you should never give up. But that is why probably, that's a very important thing. We should imbibe that, and yet at the same time, we should also learn how to fight. And when the movement is at this stage, lot of questions which are in our heart, because of which we are leftists and communists, those questions we are willing to keep inside our heart for a while, in the internal differentiation of peasantry and lot of other social very key questions, and hope that this movement is able to force the government to kneel down. If it is able to do that, then that will be the beginning of some, hopefully, the dark hegemony will begin to unravel. So I think we need to be strategic. we should not bring everything together on the table. Thank you.
I think I would request Jayaji to make concluding comments so on the whole the debate and discussion, and then we can conclude. I think, please, Jayaji.
No, I think what Comrade Ravi is saying is what everybody is thinking, that this is not the time to talk about differences amongst ourselves. Definitely not the time to talk about differences amongst various left factions. But I also feel, a very small thing. He talked of crony capitalism. The word crony capitalism means that there is a capitalism other than crony capitalism which is acceptable to us. And I want to insist that capitalism is always crony capitalism. There are always nexus everywhere in the world. So this is a word coined by those who want to defend capitalism and say yours is crony capitalism, it is not working, it is working somewhere else. It doesn't work anywhere else. So and this liberal bourgeoisie saying that, let production structure remain as it is, you can still have values, you can still have a civilized society, has to be inspected. And it is true that we don't want to talk about differences amongst ourselves, and we don't want to talk about differences in peasantry at the moment. We don't want to talk about women's rights at the moment. We don't want to talk about Dalit rights at the moment. But one has to see that if there is a protest against this fascist government, then where lies the leadership? And without a leadership, without an ideological leadership, I'm not saying ABC as a leader, we may end up as something like what happened in Egypt, what happened in Tunisia. So we have to be very clear, we have to have ideological struggle, and we have to have a very clear alternative. And okay, fine, just now the idea is to get democracy, but bourgeois democracy is no democracy. That has to be cleared, and one has to see that, one has to take a pledge that we don't rest here. After getting Modi out, we don't rest here. And people will not rest here, because it's not Modi that they are against. They are against the horrible life that they have to live every day. Ultimately, they are the main protagonists.
So, thank you very much for this brilliant presentation. We are really passing through a very inspiring moment in our history. Since last 6 years, the atmosphere in the country was there were movements, but this was the first time that they are really facing challenge. And I think the debate should continue. And as Jayaji rightly said, we should not rest here. The struggle and the ideological battles should go on, and we should definitely think of building an alternative. So with these words, and once again thanking Jayaji.
No, I want to thank all of you for giving me a chance to talk about points which I think.
So we just wanted last announcement. We keep we organizing democracy dialogue lectures. So whenever, if you are not entered your contact details, please enter, or you subscribe to our Facebook page. So let's meet again. Thank you all.